Karl Marx initiated the doctrine of dialectical materialism and promulgated it in collaboration with his friend Friedrich Engels. Lenin, a disciple of Marx, reiterated it, and Stalin collected together and elaborated the important statements of Marx, Engels, and Lenin in his Dialectical and Historical Materialism. So, Karl Marx is the principal founder of dialectical materialism, and he actually expanded it in collaboration with his friend Friedrich Engels. Vladimir Lenin was a disciple of Marx, and he reiterated the philosophy of dialectical materialism. And Joseph Stalin, the former ruler of the Soviet Union, collected and elaborated all the works and the statements of Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, and Vladimir Lenin, and brought it together in his book Dialectical and Historical Materialism. Marx belonged to the Hegelian left and accepted Hegel's teaching that reality was a process which moved according to the dialectical law of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. So, Marx was actually a Hegelian left. So Marx was a follower and a preacher of the philosophy of Friedrich Hegel. And he actually accepted Hegel's teaching that reality was a process which moved. So, according to Hegel, reality is a process, a moving process, and reality moves according to the dialectical laws of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. So, Marx was a follower or a learner of Hegel. Marx was a follower and Hegelian left, and he accepted the fact, or he accepted Hegel's teaching that reality was a process which moved according to the dialectical laws of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. He was very much impressed by Kant and Hegel's category of reciprocity, which plays an important part in the world process. So, Karl Marx was very much impressed by Immanuel Kant and Friedrich Hegel's category of reciprocity, which plays an important part in the world process. Causes produce effects, and parts produce wholes, but effects react upon their parts in such a manner that they modify and partly determine their nature. So, Karl Marx was impressed by Immanuel Kant and Hegel's category of reciprocity, which plays an important part in the world process, and that means causes produce effects and parts produce wholes, but effects react upon their parts in such a manner that they modify and partly determine their nature. So, this was what Karl Marx was impressed by. This process is exemplified by organic and social phenomena. The organs and the organism, the individual and the states are independent on each other. So, the organs and the organism, the individual and the states are actually independent of each other. Thesis and antithesis are both the cause and the effect of each other. So, in that sense, thesis and antithesis are actually both the cause and the effect of each other, and synthesis are the new situations created by them. So, thesis and antithesis work and combine together and create the new synthesis, because synthesis are the creations of the combinations of thesis and antithesis in the first place. Thesis is the interplay. Marx agreed with Hegel up to this point. Marx adopted the dialectic method of Hegel but rejected his master's absolute idealism or objective idealism. So Marx agreed with Hegel in that cause leads to effect, and parts produce the wholes, but effects change the parts or modify them in such a way that we get new phenomena altogether. So Hegel was right in that sense, but Marx could only agree with him to a certain limit or to a certain point, and after that he rejected or avoided the other philosophies of Hegel. Marx adopted the dialectical method of Hegel, but rejected his master's absolute idealism or objective idealism. So Karl Marx rejected Hegel's objective idealism, in which he says that God is responsible for the existence of phenomena and objects in the world, and God gives us the idea of the objects. And because of the infinite idea of the God, we are able to perceive and see the reality of the objects in the world. So we are able to see and perceive objects because God, who is the absolute, gives us the idea to perceive objects. So subjective and objective realities are real according to objective idealism, and that is what Karl Marx rejected. He flatly rejected Hegel's view that the world process was the teleological unfolding of a design or idea in the experience of the absolute mind or spirit. So Marx directly rejected Hegel's idea that the world was the unfolding of a teleological order of God, that there is an absolute mind or absolute entity who is the God, and he is infinite, and he has created the finite minds in the world, and he has given those finite minds the idea and the ability to perceive and see the existence of the objective realities in the world. So Marx rejected that viewpoint because there is no, according to Marx, the absolute mind or spirit. And this, and Marx goes on to say that his dialectical materialism is different from the Hegelian, but it's direct opposite. To Hegel, the process of thinking, the idea, is the creator of the world. The real world is only external. So, according to Hegel, the process of thinking, the idea itself is the creator of the real world, because the idea may be the absolute entity or the absolute mind, which is again responsible for the perceiving and the existence of the finite minds and the finite things in the world. So Hegel is wrong in that, according to Marx. And the real world is only external and unimportant, phenomenal from the idea. Friedrich Engels said, the ideal is nothing else than the material world, reflected by the human mind and transformed into forms of thought. So according to Karl Marx's friend Friedrich Engels, the ideal or the idea is nothing else than the material. So the material world itself is responsible for the ideas in our mind and reflected by the human mind and transformed into forms of thought. Nature's process is dialectical. Lenin says, dialectics is the study of contradiction within the very essence of things. So according to the former president of the Soviet Union, dialectics is the study of contradiction, opposition, or paradoxes within the very essence of things. Development is the struggle of opposites. Dialectical materialism is opposed to Hegel's dialectic of the idea. Contrary to idealism, which regards the world as the embodiment of an absolute idea, Marx's philosophical materialism holds that the world is by its very nature material, that the multiple phenomena of the world constitute different and forms of matter and motion. So, according to Karl Marx, the world itself is material, and the world itself is responsible for the ideas that come into our mind because it's material, and it forms matter and motion by itself, and that the world develops in accordance with the laws of movement of matter and stands in no need of a universal spirit. So world also develops in accordance with the laws of movement of matter. So matter moves, and therefore the world also develops, and therefore it has no need of a universal spirit or an absolute idea or an absolute mind, contrary to ideal which asserts that our mind really exists and that the material world exists only in our mind. The Marxist materialist philosophy holds that matter is an objective reality existing outside and independent of our mind, that matter is primary since it is the source of sensations, and that mind is secondary, derivative, since it is a reflection of matter, that thought is a product of matter, and the brain is the organ of thought. So, actually opposite to ideal or the idea which asserts that only our mind really exists, as Hegel says and believes, and that the material world exists only in our mind. A Marxist materialist philosophy holds that matter is an objective reality all by itself and that it has no need of any other philosophy or ideal for its existence, because the matter is an objective reality all by itself and it has an independent existence, and it does not depend on anything else for its preservation and existence. Matter, um, matter is an objective reality which exists outside the mind independently. Matter is an objective reality existing outside and independent of our mind. So matter exists regardless of the mind. The mind may or may not perceive matter, but matter still continues to exist because it is independent of the perceiving mind. And mind is secondary, the matter is primary. The matter is primary in the sense that it exists first, and it exists regardless of the mind, the organism, or the human being. And therefore, matter is primary because it is the source of our sensations. We experience sensations because of the existence of matter in the first place, and that mind is secondary. So, mind is a derivative reality. Matter leads to the creation of mind. The mind derives itself from matter since it is a reflection of matter. Mind is secondary, derivative, and it is a reflection of matter. That thought is a product of matter, and the brain is the organ of thought. Thought itself is the product of matter, and the brain is the organ of thought. Marx says, our consciousness and thinking are the product of a material bodily organ, the brain. So according to Marx, our consciousness and thinking are parts and products of a material bodily organ, the brain. The brain is responsible for our consciousness and our thinking. Matter is not a product of mind, but mind itself is merely the highest product of matter. Matter cannot be a product of mind. Matter is not a product of mind, but mind itself is merely the highest product of matter. It is impossible to separate thought from matter that thinks. It is also impossible to separate thought from matter which thinks. So the brain thinks because it's a matter, it's a bodily organ, and the bodily organ of brain leads to the creation of thought and all the other ideas that we think by ourselves. So the brain is needed in the formation of all that is there. Lenin says, matter is primary and spirit is secondary. The brain is the organ of thought. Lenin says, the concepts in our heads are images or real things. Matter is that which, acting upon our sense organs, produces sensation. Matter is the objective reality given to us in sensation. Materialism. Engels says motion is the mode of existence of matter. Matter without motion is unthinkable. Life is the mode of existence of albuminous substances, and this mode of existence consists in the constant self-renewal of the chemical constituents of these substances. And uh, albuminous body absorbs other appropriate substances from its environment and assimilates them, while other older parts of the body are decomposed and excreted. Thus, life and consciousness are products of matter in motion. So, this all leads to the theory that a matter is responsible for everything that exists, and there is the bodily matter, which is the brain, and the brain leads to thought, and the brain itself is the highest product of matter, because Lenin also says that matter is primary and spirit is secondary. Brain is the organ of thought, and Lenin again says the concepts in our heads are images or real things. So, according to Lenin, the concepts that exist in our heads are actually the images of real things, things that exist in reality, exist in our minds in the form of concepts. And Friedrich Engels says that matter is motion in reality. Matter has to be in motion, otherwise it does not exist. According to Engels, matter has always had been in motion. Matter has to have motion, otherwise it's not matter. Just like a body absorbs the different substances from its environment and combines them, assimilates them, while the other older parts of the body are decomposed with time and excreted. So, thus, life and consciousness are matter in motion. Dialectic materialism rejects the 19th century materialism, which depends upon matter and force. There is no static matter. Matter is always in motion. Physical things are not arrangements of unchanging atoms. They are always in flux. Marx rejects scientific materialism, which excludes history and its process in its capital. So, dialectical materialism rejects the former or the earlier version of materialism, which depends upon matter and force. There is no static matter. Matter cannot be static, stagnant, still. Matter is motion. Matter has always been in motion. And physical things are not arranged, or physical things are not arrangements of unchanging atoms. They are always in a state of flux, meaning physical things are always changing, evolving, moving. Marx rejects scientific materialism, which excludes history and its process in its capital. The phenomena of the world do not show any sign or purpose. Its physical phenomena can be explained by matter in motion existing in space and time, independent of any mental awareness or reflection. So, the phenomena of the world does not believe in the existence of purpose in the first place. So, there is no purpose, aim, intention in the world, because the phenomena of the world does not show any sign of purpose. Its physical phenomena can be explained by matter in motion, which already exists in space and time, independent of any mental awareness or reflection. So the phenomena of the world does not believe in the existence of purpose, aim, or intention, and it also does not believe in the existence of any mental awareness or consciousness, but it only believes and believes in matter. Matter in motion is the only reality. On the contrary, there is every indication that mind is the product of matter in motion. Hence, Hegel's assumption of the laws of thought is false. Human thinking is a reflection of the movement of the universe, of which it is a part, and its logical character is a reflection of the dialectical movement of matter. So Hegel's idea of thought and his idea of the absolute mind or spirit is unacceptable and false because no such thing exists in reality, because there is only matter and there is only matter in motion, no purpose, no consciousness or self awareness, mental awareness either, and there is no absolute spirit or absolute mind or idea either in the world or outside the world. And a human thinking is not a reflection of the movement of the universe, uh, of which it is a part, and its logical character is a reflection of dialectical movement of matter. So, the logic of events cannot be discovered by an analysis of the individual consciousness, as Hegel thinks. So, as Hegel thinks that our consciousness and our awareness is directed from outside the world by an absolute mind or spirit who is in control of our finite minds is false. That idea is not acceptable to Karl Marx and in Dialectical Materialism. So, the logic of events cannot be discovered by an analysis of the individual consciousness. So, the consciousness of the individual or the person is just not enough for the explanation of phenomena and matter of the world, but by reflection upon the operations of nature and the course of human history. So we have to reflect upon the operations of nature and the course of human history instead. The world process, according to Marx, is circular. It moves continually through these theses, antitheses, and syntheses. So the world process, according to Karl Marx, is circular. It constantly moves between cause and effect and cause, and from parts to whole. And the effect sometimes changes and modifies the cause in such a way that it becomes something else altogether. So it moves continually through thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. And synthesis becomes the ultimate product of the combination and the working of thesis and antithesis. But it is not a closed process. On the contrary, it is an open process. Its circular movement is spiral. Its new and different phases always exhibit its essentially dialectical character. So human institutions continually evolve, and no institution is sacrosanct. Uh, its new and different phases, I mean, the new creation of synthesis from thesis and antithesis exhibit its essentially dialectical or changing character. So, likewise, human institutions continually evolve, and no institution is sacrosanct, or no institution can be taken as be granted or given by some absolute mind or spirit or idea. Marx was critical of mechanistic materialism, which was deterministic and regarded the cosmic and historical processes as closed. There could be no real reciprocity in a mechanistic and deterministic universe, which believes that the cosmic and historical processes are closed. Man would be merely an effect of a cosmic and historical process upon which he could produce no effect and whose course he could not change. So, mechanistic materialism is unacceptable because it believes in closing the cosmic and historical evolution and processes. So, mechanistic materialism does not believe in the cause and the effect cycle or circle. Uh, so, mechanistic evolution instead believes that man just exists and he could not produce any difference or change to the world. He could not produce any effect, and the nature of the world he could not change. So that is what mechanistic materialism beliefs, which Karl Marx rejects. But Marx maintained once human mind was produced by nature, it became an active and causal factor in nature, which, along with natural forces, molded human history. It was able to improve the human situations in the world. Man, then, is not the slave but the master of his fate. Truth is practical. Any true philosophy is practical, a way of life. So, Marx believes that once the human mind was produced by nature, it could evolve, grow, change, and make differences and changes to itself as well as to the world it lives in. So, human mind is capable of creating history, and that's how it has reached up to the present. And and that's also how the human mind became the master of its fate. Uh, and man is the master of his fate because he evolves, because his mind evolves, grows, and becomes better with the passage of time. And truth is practical. Any true philosophy is practical, a way of life. So, man, once born into nature, by nature, evolves, grows, and his mind also grows, evolves, and makes itself better. And men make history in that regard. So nothing remains the same or constant, but rather everything is subject to change because of the evolution and the progress of the mind and the man. So they change with the passage of time and create their own fate. Dialectical materialism answers the epistemological problem in an interesting manner. To know an object is to be affected by it and also to react upon it. The subject is changed by the object, and the object is changed by the subject. Knowledge is dynamic, it changes the subject as well as the object. There is no pure, abstract, theoretical knowledge. All knowledge is practical, all truth is pragmatic and related to the activity of the subject. All truth is relative. What is true for the worker may be false for the capitalist. The conflict of truths can be resolved by force. Similarly, there are no abstract rights and justice. Rights and justice prevailing in a society are a reflection of the particular class dominating it. So, dialectical materialism answers the epistemological question of materialism in an interesting manner, because to know an object is to be affected by it and also to react upon it. The subject is changed by the object, and the object is changed by the subject. Knowledge is dynamic, knowledge is ever changing. It changes the subject and the object. There is no pure, abstract, theoretical knowledge present in the world, but rather everything is part and process of evolution, history, and the human mind acting in different ways in different times. So, truth is pragmatic, truth is practical and based upon real experiences and evolution of the world. And no abstract truth can be found in the world. All truth is relative, and what is true for the worker may be false for the capitalist. And there is no theoretical right and justice, because rights and justice, or rights or wrongs prevailing in a society, are a reflection of the particular class dominating it. So, a particular powerful class of economy and social, cultural try to dominate and create its own versions of right, wrong, good, evil, and that's what dominates the thinking of the people and the society as well. There is closely Theory is closely allied to practice. To know an object is to change. The knower is a dynamic agent who modifies the objects known. The very act of knowing changes the structure of the objects itself. So when we know something, we know the object and in its entirety. When we know the object, we also try to change it in its core. So the very act of knowing changes the structure of the object itself, because the knower is dynamic. The knower has the ability and the power to influence and change and alter the known object, and that's why the very act of knowing changes the structure of the object known. Hegel made society a means to the self expression of the individual, but Marx regarded the individual as a means to the development of society. Uh, Hegel actually made society a means to the self expression of the individual, but Marx, on the other hand, regarded the individual as a means to the development of the society. The individuals, like the cells of a living organism, stand in a relation of reciprocity to one another and to the community, all for one, all for all for one and one for all. So, according to Marx, the individuals are like the cells of a living organism which always work and function together for the living and the protection of it. So, the individuals in a community or a society are always in reciprocity to one another, and they are always in a sense of community, all for one, one for all. So one individual has the ability and the power to fight for the community, and the community in return is going to fight for one individual as well. Society is the real human unit. Hence, human thinking must be collective. So, society itself is a real thinking unit. Hence, human thinking must be collective. Human thinking has to be collective. It has to come from different minds and different individuals. It just human thinking cannot be limited to abstract ideas or absolute mind or absolute idea, which Hegel says and regards. Human action concerted and human resources pooled for the collective human good. So society itself is the man. The man is the reflection of the society, and society is combined of the collective thought and thinking of different minds working at the same time. So history is determined by economic forces. Marx believed in economic determination and interpretation of history. The methods of production determine the stage of evolution of human society. The institution of private property is at the root of vast inequalities of wealth and of opportunities for self expression. So, history is actually determined by economic forces, not by human beings trying to express themselves through the society or expressing themselves through the absolute mind, but rather history, according to Marx, is determined by economic forces. Marx believed in economic determination and interpretation of history. The methods of production determine the stage of evolution of human society. So the methods of production determine the stage of evolution of human society. So the evolution of the human society can be determined by the level of the method of production that we have achieved or we have been able to make successfully possible. The institution of private property, so private businessmen, private people, private lands, all these things have created large scale inequalities, discriminations, divisions, and disintegrations in the society and among the people. The institution of private property is at the root of vast inequalities of wealth and of opportunities for self expression. So, one class enjoys and owns everything, and the other class suffers because the one class owns and rules and controls everything else. There is a bitter conflict between a laboring class or proletariat, which produces material wealth, and a middle class or bourgeoisie, which amasses and enjoys capital. The class struggle is a conflict between capital and labor, of which Hegel took no account. So there is a bitter conflict between a laboring class, the working class, who are the proletariat, which produces material wealth. So the working class actually is responsible for the production of material and the different construction of different things. And there is a middle class or bourgeoisie which gathers and enjoys capital because it has wealth, control, and influence over the society, and in turn it also controls society. The class struggle is a conflict between capital and labor. So one party or one class has the capital and the other is laboring hard and getting nothing. And about this, Hegel said nothing. The dialectic method indicates that the antithesis must come to a head. The dictatorship of the capitalist bourgeoisie will give way to the dictatorship of the proletariat. So the antithesis has to stand up. The effect has to change the cause in a significant manner and modify it altogether. So the antithesis must come together so that the dictatorship of the capitalist changes and is challenged by the dictatorship or of the proletariat or the working class. And the capitalist wealth will pass into the hands of the many. But this can be accomplished only if private property is abolished and if all property becomes public. But in order for the dictatorship of the proletariat or in order for the working class people to be able to fight and take ownership of their own rights, private property has to be demolished. Private property cannot exist. The rule or the right to private property has to be abolished. And if all private property becomes abolished, then property is going to become available to and for all. The end can be achieved by a world revolution. The proletariat throughout the world will have to make conscious efforts and revolt and be able to achieve this through bloodshed and world revolution. The capitalist bourgeoisie possessing capital is the thesis. The destruction of the capitalist bourgeoisie is the antithesis. A classless society will be a new synthesis. Its emergence will be a long and painful process, fraught with immense privation and suffering and bloodshed. So there has to be a revolt and there has to be bloodshed as well in order for change to take place. So the proletariat has to fight for itself. The working class will have to fight for justice, equality, freedom, equality, and so forth. And even if it's bloodshed, then also it has to. And then only eventually there will be a classless society. And the thesis refers to the capitalist who has the wealth, the capital, and the control over everything. And the antithesis is the dictatorship of the proletariat who are united together to fight against the rulers. And the synthesis is going to be the new world order which is going to be created or which will be created from the destruction of the capitalist bourgeoisie. And dialectic materialism regards morality as a derivative of man's economic relations. Man consciously or unconsciously derive their moral ideas in the last resort from the practical relations on which their class position is based. So man acquire their morality from the class they have. So social, economic, financial class eventually determines the morality and the moral standards of man. from the economic relations in which they carry on production and exchange. Dialectic materialism denies the existence of God and overthrows all religions because they sanction the status quo and the capitalistic organization where there will be no exploiters. Religion will vanish. Ultimately, the state will disappear. Engels says the state is not abolished, but it withers away. So there cannot be a state because the state dominates the lower working class people and keeps them proletariat. So the state also has to be disappeared or abolished, and it has to go away automatically because of the rise of the proletariat in the world from revolt and rebellion and um, from the and the dialectical materialism does not believe in the existence of God. It rejects God. Dialectical materialism overthrows and rejects the idea as well as the existence of God, and it does not believe in religion either because everything is part of and the consequence of society, history, economics, production, and so forth. And religion does not let anyone revolt. Religion does not teach anyone to revolt or rebel against anyone, and therefore religion cannot be accepted. Religion is unacceptable because it prevents revolt and rebellion from taking place, and without rebellion or revolt, nothing can be changed. We can change something, or we will be able to create a just moral society only when we rebel. But religion will not let us rebel, and there has to be a non existence or disbelief in religion. And when the exploiters would vanish, religion would vanish automatically. So, religion is the consequence of the existence of the capitalists and the exploiters in the society. And if there will be no exploiters, there will be no religion either. So, eventually or ultimately, the state will also disappear because it's going to become invalid automatically because of the disappearance and the abolition of the capitalist bourgeoisie class, which dominates and controls everything in the society and which has created religion for keeping people in illusion. So that's how dialectical materialism works.